Hey, welcome back, modelers. So today I've got something especially special for you. This might be the most controversial video I have done to date. We're going to be talking about what actually makes a difference when applying decals. Now, if you've gone on Facebook in the last millennia, you've probably seen a lot of crazy heated debates that have gone over about decals. When anybody submits a problem that they've had with their decals, you see all sorts of stuff like this, or over here, or this thing, or that, or all sorts of others, where, oh, the problem is this, the problem has to be this, oh, well, if you don't do it this way, you're gonna have this kind of problem. And they're all definitive. So, are they right with it? What parts are correct? What parts really, no, it's just a old wives' tale, and maybe if you're using decals from the last century, then yeah, then it makes sense. But modern cartograph decals? No, you don't have to do that, bro. It's okay. So with these tests that we want to run, we're going to be looking at a few things. Matte versus gloss below the decals. What does that have to do with silvering? Now, there's some other bits to it if you are glossing to prevent the coat from below from having any damage from the solvents or color shift, things like that. Well, that's a completely different story. Getting more into those comments of, oh, well, if you don't gloss, you're guaranteed to have silvering. That's what we kind of want to address. Then when we look at it, we also want to dive into, well, what if you're using good solvents? Then does it completely negate all that? So if I have a matte coat, but if I have solvents, then does it work? Which, evidence right here, stole this from Will Pattison, his idea. 220 grit sandpaper, and I applied a decal successfully to it. So, you know, there is some truth there. But we're going to dive in deep, try to do a test. I've got 250 decals that I'm applying when it comes to this. The other thing that we want to look at that's just kind of additional little mini test is when you put in the decal, you got to just take it immediately out of the water. Is that what's going on? Or, you know, what happens if you leave it in for 20 minutes in the water and let it kind of float up to the surface? Are you going to have problems? Does it make any change to it? And I probably would. Let's just be honest. But I want to test some of that because maybe I'll be surprised, right? That's the whole point of all this. So we're also going to do a little bit with kind of the rolling of the Q-tip versus just letting it sit. Does that do anything with the difference in there? Does that make any change? But one thing that we're not going to do, because we already did the video, is the temperature of the water. Does that have any difference in the adhering and properties of that? So with that, kind of found not so much. Maybe if you have a really weird curve, there might be a little bit to it. But definitely overdoing these 250 decals, there is a crazy amount of old decals that might take like 3 minutes to come off of the decal film. And so if you have it hot, that makes a big difference. So yeah, that's a different thing we're not going to get into. And the decals that I've chosen, we get into some really, really like 50-year-old Revel decals. We're going to see if they're usable or, you know, if they're just all bad. Modern Cartograph, Edouard, all sorts of different, so not just picking good quality decals for all this, but have a plethora of different brands and even like some stuff that's probably not usable on first glance. So we'll give this a week and see what the effects are, because some people have said, well, you know, yeah, it may look okay after 24 hours, but give it a week, give it months, give it a year, and then you're going to definitely see silvering. Maybe, and if we need to come back here after a year, I'll put these off to the side and let them sit for a year, and maybe there's some truth to that. So maybe we'll do a revisit in a year with this and see what's going on with that. But let's get to the test. So the process that I'm using to apply these decals is not anything super fancy, just sliding it off of the backing paper and just applying it. Some of these will get into some Q-tip, but pretty just ordinary. Backing of this is just Mr. Surfacer 1500. So first set is going to be matte, no solvents whatsoever. Now for this, I'm switching over to applying it with Mark Fit Strong Tamiya solvent, applying it underneath and on top. We'll see what that does. All right. So with this, I'm just using the Mr. Surfacer, and then I'm using Mr. Hobby Gloss just out of the rattle can, and using that for the glossy surface. So not anything like super mirror reflective, but still very glossy. And lastly, I've got gloss, but also with solvent, the same Tamiya Mark Fit Strong. And lastly, I'm sure some of you are going to ask, oh, well, what kind of magic did you do when you're applying that decal onto sandpaper? Well, not anything super magical, to be honest. Just sandpaper and Mark Fit Strong and good quality decals. And that's it. So this is our result after a week, and yeah, it looks pretty dang horrible. So this is just matte paint, no solvent, just putting it on, and yeah, all sorts of problems. I mean, this is horrible. Now, can these even be saved? Aha! Well, that'll be a future video. That'll be the next coming video in this series, technically part 3. So yeah, plenty of fail in that. The other thing that I looked at with here is you get into the Q-tip rolling, and no, didn't really make any difference. One thing that I do like about the Q-tip though, when you just kind of let it sit, sometimes as it kind of shifts as it dries, you could have it be a little bit off place, and it's not the best. Now, did it actually do anything and help? No improvement whatsoever. Next we get into matte with solvents, and yeah, you get some silvering. Keep in mind, this is just one application of Mark Fit Strong, not getting into multiple and pinpricks and yeah, all this. So once again, these can still be saved. It is possible, but plenty of problems you see in there. Some of them though actually did pretty dang well. Some you can't even see anymore. They just disappeared into the back. And some, this one was a ridiculously old decal, most likely older than me. Pretty easily to bet on that. But yeah, so mixed, definitely better, I would say, than just regular matte, but we'll go over the numbers later. Now moving on to our gloss, and looks good, mostly. Now, does it guarantee that you won't have silvering? Well, no. There's some silvering happening. Here's some Tamiya decals, notorious for not working so well, but even this Qtip didn't kind of sit down properly. Yeah, but much better with the City of Jacksonville one there, and then this no walk strip. So much better, okay? But we don't necessarily have a myth confirmed here or anything like that. We'll go over the results, but definitely an improvement. Because the next part of this, we get into all of the different decals applied on a gloss surface with setting solution. Really good. You get into only a couple of problems here. So here you can see some silvering that have been on there and a few others, but most of them work well. Imagine that. Not a big shock. So let's go into the numbers and see what we've learned. Now, if you still have some doubts from the last test, one thing that I have for you is another which should illuminate even more. What I've got here, same kind of thing where we've got the Mr. Surfacer, and then we get the Mr. Color Gloss, and doing the water versus solution, doing that all on here. And then I have just pure carrier film. Now this is micro scale, pretty old stuff, so there's some weird stuff that's like this that's going on. But I think this paints the picture pretty well. So I've got flat on water, with water, yeah, got issues. You go over to flat with the decal solution though, pretty dang good. But I don't know what's going on with that. No clue. Gloss with water, yeah, looks good. So kind of makes sense where all this is coming from. The gloss with solution, maybe it's just this solution it didn't like, I don't know, or maybe this is part of the sheet that's close to this, and so it's seen better days. But pretty dang good. Get into a few little bit of cracking and some bubbles, but that might be something else compared to it. But if we get into like percentage of it, it looks pretty dang good. So that I think should be the final nail in the coffin. I don't know. Now the other thing that we wanted to test is what if you put the decal in the water, and then as soon as it starts, as soon as it gets wet, you take it out and you put it somewhere to let it finish its thing. Or perhaps you leave it in the water for 20 minutes and it starts floating around. That is what I've got here. And I kind of took it the whole step further. So with this is Trumper decal right away, with solution, everything still too. Looks good. However, with 20 minutes of swimming around in the little puddle that I put it in, yeah, very much looks bad comparatively. And for those that have keen eyes, you might see that this looks a little weird. It's actually the reverse side of it. So maybe with all of the glue that's not even attached to it because it's on the complete other side, it looks bad. So yeah, also did that with this compared to here. These are Tamiya decals. Yeah, don't do that, which I don't think anybody was gonna, but to kind of put in an extreme circumstance, I put it in here. Then we get into some more Tamiya decals. So right away, taking it out of the water, just plop it in for just like a second, take it out, put it in the water for 20 minutes, and yeah, doesn't look good. So, confirmed. All right, so you guys have been dying for the numbers. What are the numbers when it comes down to the 250 decals? What are our failure rates? Well, first I gotta kind of explain a little bit how I did this. If it has just a little bit of silvering, I consider that decal a fail. Now, of course, you know, whether it's fixable, that's a whole subjectivity bit, that a whole nother bit. So if you guys can think of a different way that I can maybe mathematically, statistically do this a little bit better, because yeah, I mean, if I have something like this that is a total failure, it's the same point as something that maybe just has a little teeny bit of silvering, but overall I think the ones that are pretty failure are pretty big failure. But as we go with the numbers, I think they're actually even more significant, because as we get into less failure rate, we also get into much better quality overall. So it paints even bigger picture. So when I look at just matte and just water, we have a failure rate of 84%. 84% of them had silvering, Okay. Now, what if I have matte and I have decal solution with it? Then it completely changes. That's where we get into 16% failure rate. And you can see some of that with the video I showed you. And then when we get into gloss with just water, now we're getting 14%. Now, close to the 16, so probably not statistically significant, probably close. But if you go and do both gloss and solvents, now we're getting into single digit territory. Now we're just 5%. So I think that speaks to it. The other thing that speaks quite big volumes is looking at the entire decal film sheets that I showed you. That paints a pretty big picture of what's kind of happening, and it's pretty conclusive, I'd have to say. So next part in this series, I'm going to be showing you a bunch of different decal solutions, and we're going to go through and test all these and see which one's best, which one's trash, which one is pretty much just water maybe, things like that. Third part of this series, I'm going to go in and show you how do you take some of these horrible decals that are just crazy filled with silvering and fix that. So we'll do that in there. Now if you have any comments that you want to let me know how I did the test wrong, I'm sure there's a few people that'll say, no, the way you should have done it, because you can just throw this away. You know, we didn't learn anything from this. I'm sorry. Trying. So tell me how to do the test, and I can do another one later on. We can revisit this. If you think maybe a year from now, maybe I'll take a look at these decals a year from now and see what has changed. So let me know what your questions are, what are your suggestions. I'm all ears, want to see how we can do this test better to make sure that you guys are better informed. Until next time.